Is it still possible to pass legislation that protects our environment? In the past, leaders from both political parties have taken major actions to protect our wild places, but it seems like these days there isn't much of an appetite for that in DC. So what can we do in the states to protect our public lands? Our guest today is here to tell us just that. Welcome back to Participation Trophy, the do-gooder's guide to changing the world, an unscientific podcast where we set out to discover if participation trophies actually drove a generation of greats. I'm your host, Topher Williams. On today's podcast, we have a Montana legend. She is equal parts outdoor enthusiast and passionate shoe collector. She has spent the last 7 years as head of one of the most important conservation organizations in the West, Montana Conservation Voters. Please welcome Whitney Tawney. Hey, Whitney.
Hi, Topher. So nice to be with you. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, Whitney, I'm really excited to have you on the podcast. You're such a legend and an icon. I'd love to just jump right into it. Can you tell us a bit about who you are and how you're changing the world?
Yeah. Well, I am born and raised in Missoula, Montana. I think that is an important part of my story because that's where I've rooted a lot of what's driven me through my career. I also am an enthusiast for everything indoor and outdoor habitat. So that is another piece to my story. I am a mom, which I'm really proud of. I've got a 7-year-old Henry who is, he's going to change the world. I'm just setting up the stage for him. And I have kind of danced around the country in the sense that I grew up in Montana, but I went to school in Oregon. I then worked in DC and then have found my way back home to Montana to protect this place that I love so much.
You, Whitney, are a self-described daddy's girl, and you attribute a lot of your advocacy work today to your parents and their lifelong commitment to Montana's clean air, clean water, and conservation, right? Can you tell us a little bit about your parents and how their work shaped you?
Of course. So as I said, I'm born and raised in Montana. And I like to say that I was in training alongside our giant black lab, who, to be fair, is still, if he was still alive, he would still be bigger than I am. This giant black lab. And I felt like I was in training alongside him with my dad in the duck blind. And so that is kind of like being outside from the very beginning was part of our education, growing up in a place that is so accessible and wonderful to be outside. And then my mom and my dad actually founded the Montana Environmental Information Center, which is the first environmental lobby that happened in Montana. And it initially started as a thesis project. And now they just have hit over 50 years. They have staying power, and they're here to stay as far as working on the legislature, working on the federal level, everything else, but really paying attention to the resources that are important to Montana and activating Montanans from all walks of life to make sure that we're protecting this place. My dad actually passed away in middle school, and I just feel like that has been something for me that has been this thing that's always kind of biting at me, is that how do I make sure that I'm protecting his legacy? How do I make sure that I'm making him proud? How do I make sure that I am kind of showing up every day? He was larger than life and was beloved by everybody. Our former governor, Mark Roscoe, who is a Republican, when I first moved back to Montana, I cold called him and he said, "Oh, you're Phil Tawney's daughter?" And we started talking, right? So I think that he's been a really good example, even though he has passed, of how to show up every day and also how to have conversations with people of no matter what their backgrounds are, to make real change and be a positive force for protecting a place that we really love. And then I would also just add that it's kind of a family business in the sense that my brother has also been in the movement for a long time on the conservation side as well. And so it's fun to be a part of that. And also my sister way back when was a Montana Conservation Voters member and joined the local board here in Bozeman when she was in college, which my last job was the executive director of Montana Conservation Voters. So it all is kind of wrapped up in a very weird small circle, which Montana is a small place, but it makes it feel even smaller. We've actually had a couple of guests from Montana. I used to live, for the listeners, I used to live in Montana. So I have a really special place in my heart for that state. We've heard it said that Montana is just one big town with one long main street in the form of Interstate 90. I'm curious, though, Whitney, you talked about how you're sort of in this family business of trying to protect Montana's environment, clean air, clean water, wild country. And you really got that start with your dad. Do you ever feel like you have big shoes to fill, or that it's your responsibility or obligation to do that for him? 100%, which is something that I think creates a lot of stress and energy all at the same time. Most of it is really positive, but it is one of those things where, like, how do we make sure that you're doing your best every single day and also able to like reconnect with a bunch of people? I think that that's been like the biggest joy for me moving back to Montana. Well, shifting gears a little bit here, Whitney, you served as a page for U.S. Senator Max Baucus in Washington, D.C. And I can't be the only person who doesn't know what a page is. Can you educate the children? What exactly is a page in the U.S. Senate? Well, everybody, if you are under the age of 16, you should be looking at being a page in the U.S. Senate. There used to be a page program on the House side. There is no longer. But being a U.S. Senate page means that you go to D.C., Washington, D.C. for a semester. You can either do during the summer or during the school year. I recommend doing the school year because the teachers are fantastic and also just kind of up your level of schooling and everything else. But the mechanics of it are really that you are setting up the Senate every single day. It's a small class, so there's like no more than 30 kids, and you are front row seat to what is happening in government and in that particular branch as well, right? So setting up their desks, running errands for people, and I think kind of being willing to do whatever you need to do to find a senator during a vote, and having all this access. And even going back, as then I went back of many years later after graduating from college to work for a senator, you never have the same level of access because you basically get access of a elected member because you need to be able to find people for important meetings, votes, etc. So it is like the front row seat. I think the other part of the program, which is really important, especially for a younger state like Montana, which was my background, is going there and seeing the history and understanding the foundation of what makes our country so wonderful and also what makes it work. And I think that's the other piece that just was really invigorating for me. I'm not sure it's as true as it is today, but there was this like collaboration that was happening regardless if it was a Democrat or a Republican or an independent. They were all working together for the greater good of America. And to me, that's really beautiful and was something I really was proud to be a part of. That's so cool. So it's a program for school-age kids, teenagers, 16 and younger, I think you said. Honestly, Whitney, you must have some wild stories from that time in your life. Yes. So junior year of high school, that's their requirement. So that is like when they're taking folks. And some people have been like, well, I don't want to miss this season of soccer, or I don't want to miss prom, or whatever it is. And it's just such an amazing experience that you don't want to miss it. I would say as funny things that come to mind is we got to go to a State of the Union, and it was when George W. Bush was president. And so we laid on the floor of the House chambers because it was the only space for us to be there, right? Additionally, there was an incident where then Senator Ted Kennedy spiked the St. Patrick's Day punch, and everybody freaked out because they were worried about all these 16-year-olds having their first taste of alcohol. It was like a fiasco. And then I felt really lucky in that one of my long-term mentors had worked for Hillary Clinton, and her name happens to be Whitney Williams. And because we share the same first name, I then became Hillary Clinton's person when she was on the floor. She was the one that was like, hey, Whitney, I need a glass of water. Or, hey, Whitney, will you go grab this thing off the printer? Or, hey, Whitney. And that was really pretty amazing. And then the last thing I will say is like, I think just seeing them behind closed doors and realizing that they're real people. And whether it's like a squabble between like a couple of senators that are sharing a row house for like, the year or whatever it is about like who's doing laundry and who's not, like, it's pretty funny to be able to just kind of like peel that back. And I think another like big thing was like, I got to deliver a donut almost every day that was pink frosting with sprinkles to then Senator Joe Biden, then of course became the president of the United States, which was pretty cool to think about, right? But at the same time, then when I was stuck outside of a caucus room, because they had the pages sitting outside of caucus rooms to like count who's gone in, who's gone out, like what's happening, all of the things. I was stuck there for hours.
What a cool program. Wait, Whitney, I have to go back 1 second. I have to know who in the U.S. Senate is not doing their laundry.
Well, there was a time where I believe it was Dick Durbin and Schumer were rooming together, which was a very like odd couple situation. Would argue with each other quite a bit about who's doing the laundry, who's doing the dishes, all of the things.
That's amazing. What an incredible opportunity to really see behind the curtain. I know that as you got older, right, you went back to DC to continue working, as a fully fledged professional. And I'm curious at what point during this journey, having grown up with parents who were doing advocacy work and having the rare opportunity to spend so much time interfacing with U.S. senators as a teenager, when did you realize that you were actually making a difference?
So I have one big point, I think, that where it all like came together for me. So I initially moved out to work for then Senator Max Baucus, who is a senior senator from Montana. He's also who I had paged for. I moved out 2 weeks after college graduation, which was nuts. And I still am kind of like kicking myself for doing that so quickly. But I was in their office and I was doing constituent service stuff in the mailroom, nothing glorified. Like it was definitely the grunt work and like on the bottom rung. But through that, I got to meet some folks that worked for Ducks Unlimited. And because I am from Montana, I come from a hunting and angling family. I do those things myself. They were kind of like, oh, she's like this weird unicorn, because who's a young woman who actually likes these things and understands it too. And so as a baby lobbyist for Ducks Unlimited, it was the 2014 Farm Bill that was being negotiated. I think it got shifted several times because of how long Congress was taking on that bill. But basically, they handed me something that they thought was kind of the turd or the thing that wasn't really actually going to happen. And because I am like a dog with a bone, I saw this as an opportunity to really see if I could do it and also build some real bipartisan love around it. That issue in particular, it's named Sodsaver. It wasn't a new concept. It wasn't something I came up with. Basically, it's to protect native sod so that it's protected in perpetuity, because once native sod is gone, you lose all the nutritional value of the soil and everything else that's kind of going on with that. And for ducks in particular, it's a really important habitat zone, right? So I somehow started to build a bunch of relationships with Congress people to see what we could do. And one of those people was ultimately someone that I secured was a conservative from the state of South Dakota. Her name is Kristi Noem. Folks probably
Kristi Noem, like the current Department of Homeland Security head.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
At that point, she was a freshman. She had just come in to Congress, as well as Tim Walz, who, of course, ran as the VP candidate with Kamala Harris. And it was a really intense time, right? Because there was a lot going on. The Farm Bill is huge. It's everything from like food stamps to support for farmers and ranchers on their landscapes with grant funding, et cetera. But also there's food security pieces, rural development, all of these things, including a conservation title. So it's one of many, many things. And there was a lot of opposition to putting in a new idea and a new concept into this bill. And Representative Noem, to her credit, was very strong in that she literally got shouted down by her committee chair. She was pulled out into a hallway late at night. We were watching on the TV, and it was like past midnight, right? And she got pulled out and screamed at by her chair to say, just drop this. But because we had built so much support for her through Ducks Unlimited, which is an amazing conservation organization with a huge network of people, especially in kind of more rural areas, and additionally to knowing that like we had her back, and then she wasn't in the fight alone, that she was willing to kind of have her backbone straight and push through. And ultimately, it's pretty exciting because Sodsaver did pass. It was part of the final bill, and it's a principled concept that basically is there in perpetuity until hopefully no one, right, knock on wood, ever calls it out. But it's a big deal. And it was really exciting because we kind of beat all the odds to be able to do it. And I think especially as a young woman, and at that time with a very young freshman who was also a woman, it was kind of this like amazing, powerful moment. And Kristi, Noem, of course, is a hunter herself. And so we had a real kinship over that as well.
Wow, that's incredible. And to have a coalition that includes someone like Tim Walz and Kristi Noem, I mean, today in 2025, that feels impossible, right? Mm-hmm. I think many of us are looking at the political landscape in America today and saying there's no scenario where Kristi Noem and Tim Walz will agree on anything or work together on anything. But what you're saying is that only 11 years ago, they were doing that and you were part of it, which is pretty cool. But I'm curious, I mean, what do we need to do to get our leaders working together like that again?
I mean, I think that there's always something you can find some commonalities in, right? I feel like motivation mapping people, although it sounds creepy, is really important. So knowing what are the things that make them tick, right? For Kristi Noem, it was that she really does love to hunt. She loves pheasants. Saving sod was really important, not only for her family's kind of outdoor experience, but also for the economy of South Dakota. So knowing that, but then also knowing that she was a mom and like passing that on to her next kid, like her kids and the next generation was really important. So how do we make sure that we're protecting that? And so I think framing is really important on how you're approaching those conversations. I think the other part is just being a human and showing up. I think it's really easy to stay in our corners and not have conversations with people that you might not think that you're going to agree with anything on. But the reality is that people are still people. And I think in some ways, right, like social media and this like era of living online has really deteriorated our communication skills with each other, as well as just like kind of society in general in a lot of ways, although I do love my own social media and things along those lines. And so I think it's just like being willing to actually take the meeting, take the time, get a hold of people, right? It kind of harkens back to that example of me moving back to Montana to lead Montana conservation voters, when Montana conservation voters does have kind of this like rap as being very liberal and progressive and everything else. But it didn't scare me in the sense of picking up the phone to call our former Republican governor, Mark Roscoe, to say, hey, will you help me with this democracy issue around like the judiciary? And he was really excited to talk about it, right? And protect the Constitution. Because I think that there are still issues that we can work together on, and also kind of being able to stay focused on that and not all of the other things that you might disagree on.
I heard someone recently say that stopping fascism requires you to work with people that you don't necessarily agree with or even like. But the only way to stop authoritarianism is to have a coalition that is bigger than the authoritarians' coalition. And I think what you're saying to us is a great reminder that that's still possible. And it's still possible when you're a young woman in DC, or when you're a young queer person or a person of color and you don't know sort of how you fit into the existing power structure. We need to remind ourselves that a broader coalition is stronger than a smaller one. And I think that's such good advice from you, Whitney. I'm curious, especially sort of going off this thing you've talked about of navigating this space as a young woman. I mean, you have both a blessing and a curse in that you look really young. And you mentioned to me before we started that you've been mistaken as a teenager, even though you're almost 40, right? So I'm curious, as somebody with this blessing/curse, what do you do to confront your imposter syndrome and to prove the haters wrong?
Yeah. Well, for sure. I do turn 40 this year. And I do.
I didn't mean to out you like that, Whitney.
No, I mean, I'm proud of all 40 years, right? Like, I'm earning them for sure. It doesn't help that my 7-year-old loves to call me sister in public places because he thinks it's hilarious that people think but I think for me, it's like, I am really, intentional about how I show up into spaces so that I am able to, go up and introduce myself to anybody that's in the room, and that I feel really prepared for that. So I think doing my homework on the back end is really important. And I think also just minding my P's and my Q's, crossing my T's, dotting my I's, all of the things. I think that in some ways, it is kind of an Achilles heel because it does get at my perfectionism a little bit, but I also think that it has served me in the long run because then it shows that I'm a serious and capable leader, and I can show up in whatever space it is and be someone that people can build a relationship with. And I think that's the other part, is just continuing to try showing up, regardless of how hard it is, really does matter. And you know what? The haters can hate, but when I'm 60, I'm going to look 40, which is going to be great.
Such a good thing to keep in mind. I'm telling myself that, though I don't know that it will play out that way. We'll have to see. So another thing that you have expressed before is that if you could give your younger self one piece of advice, it would be to make sure that you're really taking the time to live life fully. What does that mean?
Yeah, I think that a good example, is kind of that, what I said earlier about moving directly from college 2 weeks later to go work for Max Baucus. I'm am trying to be more intentional about taking that time for myself and my family, and especially my kiddo, because I know that we have one. And then I think also figuring out what really is the thing that you need every day. For me, it's exercise is a stress management tool for me that's really important because it also affects my sleep if I haven't been exercising. Getting outside, no matter what the weather is, which in Montana, it can snow in August, right? So making sure that you are intentional about spending that time outside, and also getting inspired by my family, but also my chosen family too. I think that is a really important component of what makes me tick and also feel not giving up in so many different ways, is having that support system and making sure that you are showing up for them additionally as well, which it all sounds very exhausting. But I do think that is for me, those are the things that are going to keep getting me out of bed every day and keep motivating me.
That's such good advice. I mean, I like to remind myself often that nobody has laid on their deathbed and said, I wish that I had gone to more meetings, or I wish that I had taken one more call. It's not those things aren't important, right? I mean, I do think I would lay on my deathbed and regret it if I didn't build a career or chase after doing work that I love doing. But there's a balance between that and living a life that's really full and for yourself. And so it's just such good advice for us to keep in mind, Whitney.
Yeah.
I've also heard, go ahead, please.
Oh, I was just going to say, like, I think the other thing that I missed in like kind of my long list of things that I was talking about is like travel too is really sparks a lot of joy for me. And I think especially having a kiddo now, like, and knowing that I didn't really leave the state of Montana much until I was an adult. And there's a big wide world out there that's really important for my son Henry to see up close and personal, because that's going to help with his education overall. And the adventures that we have are so awesome. And I'm so proud because I also feel like because he's a part of our life and he goes to dinner with us and he goes on these trips and whatever, then he is able to kind of hold his own in a way that a lot of 7-year-olds aren't.
Yeah, that's true. I have met Henry and I can confirm that is the case. I've also heard that part of your self-care routine is that you're a total bookworm and that you're working on reading 40 books this year alone, which, like, first of all, wow. I mean, honestly, you are a mom and you're running a statewide conservation organization and you're reading 40 books, and I can barely get through the one on my nightstand right now. So that just, first of all, is really impressive. But I'm curious if you can share with me and for all of our listeners, what is a book that has really changed your world?
Yeah, well, I'm happy to share it because it might sound silly, but Matthew McConaughey's Greenlights is literally my favorite book that I now give to anyone that's graduating from college or secondary school, whatever it is, because I think it is this love letter to living life and reminding yourself to do that, right? And so he has all these kind of vignettes. It's like more like short stories and everything else. He also reads the audiobook if that's more your speed, which I've done both because I love him so much. And maybe there's something to him being like from Dazed and Confused, like the girls stay the same age. And I feel like I'm staying the same age for forever. But I think that for me, it's like, it's all these wild journeys that he was on, right? And has turned out to be a really successful human being outside of his own acting career, his businesses, etc. I think he puts a lot of value into his family and everything else. I don't know him personally, so of course some of this is beyond that. But I think it's just the love letter to life to take that. Maybe take the extra hour to go down a dirt road, even though you could go in a straight way and get there faster, because there could be something that you learn through that process.
Well, Matthew McConaughey, if you're listening, Whitney is your biggest fan of your book, and she would appreciate a signed copy.
Yes.
So you hear that, Mr. McConaughey? Let's make it happen. Okay, now we're going to play a little game, Whitney. I'm going to ask you some rapid fire this or that questions about conservation. Are you ready?
I am ready.
Okay, great. Recycle plastic or avoid it altogether?
I think recycle plastic because I'm a realist at this point. We don't have enough stuff that
Fair enough.
Have as alternatives, but we do not have plastic bags in our house. I am proud to say.
There you go. All right. Donate to global wildlife organizations or support local conservation groups?
Support local conservation groups. Local's where it's at. There's that old adage that all politics is local. You can really make a difference with your own dollar going to what is happening in your community. And the reality is that impact will be bigger and beyond donating to some big national group.
Good advice from Whitney. All right. Next question. Popular trail or hidden path?
Both.
Fair.
I think that, like, for me, it's like I think about a popular trail that I do all the time, and it's probably because of the convenience. But it also has all the things that I love. It's called Drinking Horse. It has water. It has wildflowers. It has views, all of the things. It's wildly popular. But I also love to see people that are maybe on the trail for the first time and enjoying that. I think the off the beaten path trail is also wonderful because you do learn a lot about your own perseverance and abilities to get through that. I am geographically challenged, so sometimes that makes me nervous. So if I'm alone, I'm definitely going to be on a more populated trail than if I am with my husband, who is like a homing pigeon and can find his way back from anywhere.
I mean, sticking to a well-known trail when you're hiking alone is just generally speaking good advice, probably from our resident conservationist, Whitney Tawney. Okay. This or that. Posting an Instagram picture of flowers or of the mountain views?
Mountain views?
Yeah, I'm the same way. Okay, are you looking for birds or are you looking for fungi?
Neither.
What are you looking for on the trail?
Probably like wildflowers and animals.
I love it. Great answer. Okay, would you rather climb a mountain or explore a forest?
Climb a mountain.
Would you rather spot a mountain goat or see a bald eagle?
Mountain goat.
Mountain goat. That's fair. That's totally legit. Okay, Whitney, we have arrived at the most important question of this entire podcast. It is the whole reason that we are here. Did you receive a participation trophy, and what was it for?
I have received a participation trophy, maybe a few in my lifetime, but the one that I would point to that I think is very unique is that I was on the Montana Super Skippers, which is, yes, a jump roping team out of Missoula, Montana.
Oh my God.
Which I do have photographic evidence. They now are putting it on like ESPN, like 5 or something. So for this competition in particular that I'm going to reference, but it was not, thankfully, during that time period. But we thought we were hot shit, right? Like we thought we were like amazing jump ropers. We had beat out all these other states, mostly interior West. And then we actually got into nationals and we were able to travel to Disney World. And that's when we painfully realized that we were definitely not qualified to be there. And we're not so great compared to a lot of the other teams. But in the end, it was a big deal for my hometown of Missoula, Montana, for there to be a team that's going to the nationals. And so I did, have an article that was in our hometown paper, which I felt like was my participation ribbon, in addition to like the other things that they gave us at that event.
So wait, just to be clear here, Whitney, you were a competitive jump roper, which first of all, my husband was a competitive jump roper in college, or not in college. That's outrageous. It was not in college. It was in elementary school. That would be even funnier if it was in college. In elementary school, he was also a competitive jump roper. And now when we go to the gym, he's always like showing up all the like dude bros with his jump roping skills. So that's pretty cool. Maybe you guys need to have a jump rope smackdown for the crown. I don't know. I think that would be really fun. But I also don't want to skip past that the national jump roping competition happened at Disney World.
Yep. Yes.
I mean, that just feels appropriate to me. That seems right.
It felt appropriate. It was weird. The whole experience was strange.
I can't imagine why that would be weird.
And I will say, like, I've never been in better shape in my life. I was in elementary school. I've always had a kind of freakish metabolism, but I had like an 8-pack, right? Because I was jumping multiple hours a day, and in so many different kind of like arenas, in the sense of like my own jump roping and double Dutch and like all of these other things. So, and I had guns. Like I literally looked like Popeye. So it was cool.
Oh my gosh. Okay, well, I need photos of this. Please post them. Tag me, tag the pod. We need this evidence. All right, Whitney, where can folks find you online to follow and connect and continue the conversation?
Well, I am on all of my social media as my own name. So Whitney Tawney, Tawney. So on Instagram, I'm at Whitney Tawney. You can then see Paolo and I's creations in the kitchen, which hopefully people are not getting tired of, but it's really fun for us to stay in connection and kind of build community around. And we've had a bunch of people buy the cookbook that we're cooking through and kind of join us on this journey, which is really fun. And then of course, like LinkedIn is another place to find me, for sure, because I am always trying to make that next connection with people and scratch that creative itch of like learning more about what's going on in the world. Because I'm never going to be the smartest person in the room. I always want to talk to people. So, yeah.
Well, I appreciate you coming to talk to us, Whitney. Thank you so much for being on the podcast today, for telling us about your participation trophy, for being a national jump roping participant, not champion, but participant, Intermountain West champion of jump roping, and for telling us how we can get back to a country where people from different parties and from different walks of life can work together to make change. That really is the do-gooder's guide to changing the world. Thank you, Whitney, for being on the podcast. I'm glad we had you here.
All right. Thanks so much, Topher. Hope to see you soon.
Thank you so much for joining us for another episode of Participation Trophy. I'm your host, Topher Williams. Be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel, Participation Trophy Podcast, and follow me on Instagram at @TophMcGof so you don't miss one single thing. Until next time, remember, it's up to us to make the world that we want to see. Bye.